and welcome to the latest edition of the Public Sector I Heart You podcast. I'm Rebecca Davis, Chief Executive at West Midlands Employers, and today I'm joined by Brad Sinclair, who's Managing Director of Opus People Solutions, and we're going to be talking all about agency provision across local government, as well as a bit more about how wholly owned companies within the public sector have a huge role to play in driving innovation and supporting us deliver services to our community. Brad, thank you ever so much for joining us today. Can you just tell us a little bit about Opus People Solutions and some of the things that you do?
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for having me on. Really excited to have a conversation. Well, Opus, as you say, is a wholly owned local authority trading company, and I think that really sets us apart about what we do in the market and kind of how we try and help the client councils and the partners that we work with, ultimately trying to make a difference to what we do. But ultimately, Opus is a workforce solution and people solution business, ultimately looking to fill temporary recruitment, but work in partnership with the councils that we work with.
Brilliant. So tell us a little bit about your role at Opus and how long you've been there, and I suppose what drew you into working in the public sector?
So I'm managing director, as you mentioned previously. So I'm actually have a finance background. So I'm an accountant. So I joined Opus just coming up for 8 years now. So I came in as the finance director. And I think from my point of view, there's a bit of a misconception around accountants. And when I was working in practice before my role in Opus, actually, I was dealing with people all the time. It wasn't about the numbers. Yes, the numbers are important, but actually I was dealing with business owners. And I've taken that through in my role with Opus, really, in terms of actually dealing with people. And it's about people, and that usually will drive the numbers and drive that performance.
Yeah, and I think that's the heart of it, isn't it? And that's really in terms of where agency provision is often driven by numbers, but at the heart of it is what we're trying to work with Opus on in the West Midlands has certainly been about putting people, agency workers, making them see a career pathway in local government. So tell me a little bit about, in terms of agency provision, some of the big challenges you're seeing in the sector at the moment.
I think from agency it's quite wide varying, and I think certainly in the public sector and local government specifically, there's been a lot of change. I think with austerity sort of since 2010, then IR35 for a few years before the private sector. Things like Brexit, COVID have all had a real impact on just recruitment generally in local government and careers in local government, and that's where I think agency provision actually can support the local government in terms of actually delivering services. I think the challenges that we've seen over the years is actually because of some of those issues from a regulation point of view, but also from a financial point of view in the public sector. It's actually meant that agency provision is propping up some key services, and it's about trying to rebalance that and actually say, how can we make public sector or support public sector being fit for the future, and improving workforce overall, not just agency provision.
Yeah, and I think it's become a bit of a bad word, hasn't it, agency provision? Yeah. We've seen the headlines, we've read the articles, where we're constantly, as a sector, shamed really for using agency workers. And I think there is a space, isn't there, for dialing down agency usage, managing costs better. But actually, there is a positive place for agency provision. So before we talk about some of the challenges, tell us about some of the ways in which agency provision should and can be actively supporting the sector.
Temporary recruitment is really, really key, I think, for any business or any sector, certainly local government, where there are skill shortages, but there are also big projects that are needed. There are big strategic elements that are needed to deliver those services. I think if we just take local government reform, which is obviously key at the moment, there's going to be a lot of change there that a council is really going to need skills to come in and support that strategic drive for change, and that's where temporary recruitment can really help with that. It gives the flexibility. It means that actually you can bring in that skill much quicker. Don't need to go for a bigger process, permanent recruitment, and again you can get needs or expertise that you might not necessarily know what you need completely. So temporary recruitment can give a lot of flexibility very, very quickly, but also bring in that skills that's needed when there's large projects. So there's lots of positives to temporary recruitment from that respect.
Absolutely, and I think that mantra of trying to reduce agency usage is right, but it always is going to have a place, isn't it? There is always going to be a need for agency use. I think what we've seen, certainly in the West Midlands, is that it's a bit of a runaway mine train. Sometimes councils aren't managing it tightly, aren't understanding the true cost of spend. So just tell me a little bit about where you've seen councils actually improve how they manage agency in a positive way and as a result reduce their spend.
I think, again, our approach being where we're looking at the whole workforce solution, that kind of holistic view of what is the council trying to achieve, what are its priorities, how can it become an employer of choice, because the only way to kind of reduce agency spend is actually to improve permanent recruitment, is to improve recruitment and workforce overall, and that goes from attraction all the way through to retention. So there's many aspects to it. So ultimately, we can't just focus on just the agency element. You have to look at and work with HR and the organisation in a strategic way to say, okay, what can we do that will little things like increasing or improving the recruitment process. That is going to make huge strides to ensuring they're getting candidates quickly, or that candidate journey is the best it can be. So by doing that, which can take time, it is an investment. And again, I think in terms of where local government is at in terms of lack of capacity, lack of funding, it's very, very difficult for councils to do that strategic thinking or invest for the future in terms of their long-term workforce, and that's where we're there to try and support with that, but it does take time. But it's those incremental increases and improvements that are going to ultimately improve workforce recruitment overall for the future.
Yeah, and I think that has often been a challenge, hasn't it, for certainly organisations to fully understand the complexity of the agency contracts that are in place. Tell us a little bit about how that whole cost model is really important for organisations to understand when they're making decisions about agencies in the future.
Yeah, I think what we see in the market is usually when we're speaking to councils, usually the key area that they focus on from a spend point of view or a cost point of view is the margin that they're paying the provider or the agency. But again, there's many more costs to that than just the margin. Actually, the margin is one of the smallest parts of the spend. The largest part is the actual worker, their pay, the statutory on costs. Again, depending on how they're procured, there can be additional costs within the contracts, etc. That again councils might not be aware of, like higher temp to perm fees, things like that. So when a council needs to assess their actual cost of temporary recruitment, again they need to look at their whole recruitment piece, including permanent and temporary, but it's about what are they trying to achieve, and if it's the case that they've got too many temporary workers or they're of low quality, well, their spend is going to be much higher than if you are able to control your temporary recruitment, and by reducing the number of temporary workers that you're using or improving the quality that you've got, which will reduce the numbers that you're using, will actually bring your costs down much more significantly than just focusing on the margin element. So it is that looking at the whole picture, looking what the priorities are for the council and assessing what can be achieved and what needs to be achieved for them to realise the services, but realise their employment goals, which is ultimately going to ultimately bring financial gains to the council by controlling their temporary usage.
Absolutely, and that's quite difficult, I think, sometimes for councils to grapple with, isn't it? When you're looking, margins are easy to compare,
yes,
but actually they only tell you a very small part of the true cost.
And they don't take into account things like off contract, where they spend with multiple agencies that are on multiple terms, sort of both financial and procurement risk. So there's lots of elements in that regard that sometimes that's not considered when comparing providers. So therefore, that the margin on those off-contract agencies could be much higher, which again needs to be factored in as well.
Yeah. So what tips would you give to someone in a council who was there thinking, right, I've got to tackle agency spend, we've got to dial down our spend? The easy option is sometimes to look at, okay, well, I can get the cheapest margin possible. That looks like a saving on paper. How would you encourage someone to do things differently?
Well, I think it needs to be an organisational push. It can't just come from just one department. It can't be procurement owned, can't be HR owned, but again, sort of certainly HR, human resources, needs to be a key player. It is ultimately recruitment is a HR function. So I think again it's bringing the council on that journey in terms of what are they trying to achieve. Ultimately, what's the history of what they've had before, and actually when they have made changes or moved to maybe a lower margin offering, has that actually realised the benefits that they expected previously? So I think again it's making sure that the key functions within the organisation are on board with any potential changes or what they're looking at, and I think that comes back to the leadership as well in terms of what are the priorities of the council. Again, every priority of every local authority is going to be people. Is going to be we need to get more skills into the organisation. We need to get more people, young people, into the organisation for the longer term. But that also feeds into decisions around agency spend, because it's all recruitment and that all feeds into. So it's those kind of conversations that I think council should be having internally across all directorates, but then making sure that procurement, HR are sort of on board with that message and understand that message and then can drive that forward.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about some of the success stories you've had across councils in the UK, because I know you've worked very closely with some of the large councils, both in the East of England region and in the West Midlands region.
Yeah, so yeah, there's been a lot of changes. I say I've been with Opus for 8 years now. When I came into Opus, sort of they only had one sort of large council outside of Suffolk County Council, our owner. So it was very much at the infancy of the business, and it's really pleasing now that we've spread sort of as you say across the East of England, the Midlands, and now the West Midlands. So and I think the key success is sort of keeping money in the public sector, being owned by the public sector, sort of hundreds of millions of pounds that have been kept in the sector and not gone out of the sector. So that's really pleasing and a real positive. But I think what we've been able to do with the councils that we work with, and again I think a topical example at the moment is obviously local government reform. So we've worked with Northamptonshire County Council since 2017, which obviously went through its own reform sort of a few years ago, splitting into 2 unitaries and a children's trust, and that meant bringing sort of 8 districts councils into that as well. So kind of from that point of view, we were able to add a lot of value with supporting them to realise what they wanted to do, because I think temporary recruitment again is going to play a big part in local government reform and that flexibility. So there's aspects like that that are really pleasing that we've been able to support those councils and they've been able to improve off the back of that. Obviously we're a small part of some of that improvement, but again I think the level of savings that we've been able to realise for our councils that we're working with, sort of 50-60 million pound plus in temporary recruitment savings, high fulfilment rates, sort of 97-98%, are all really good metrics that we're adding value to the councils that we're working with. But I think fundamentally the relationships that we've built, the councils that we've worked with, I'm very touch wood, I'm very happy that we've never lost a large-scale temporary recruitment contract, which is really pleasing. So from that point of view, we've got really strong relationships with the councils that we work with. We work with them in partnership, and that enables us to realise those gains that I've talked about, but also means that we can really work with them and be adaptable with them as well when challenges come up. And actually it's a partnership where we can have conversations about what are you trying to achieve, how can we help you. We're trying to help, so how can we help you? And we then try and find the solutions to try and help them with what they're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And I know councils can often be very nervous about changing agency contracts because the high risk of potentially not having agency workers show up who are filling vital roles such as refuse collection, social work roles, which are essential frontline services, can be really nervous. So tell us a little bit about how you managed to transition councils onto working with Opus as a framework.
So it is about that again, relationships. From the start of the implementation, we've got quite a robust implementation plan. It's about building a relationship with the council as quickly as possible, and sometimes that started throughout the procurement process as well. so that they feel at ease. But the key aspect of our implementations is continuity of service. It's the biggest element that we apply risk factors to and want to mitigate. But it's not actually as scary as I think as some councils think. We've got over 300 suppliers on our supply chain. The majority of our suppliers are usually supplying into the contracts that we're taking over. So from that point of view, that can mitigate the risk. So they're already signed up to new contracts that we bring on board. So it is then becomes down to the onboarding the people, the temporary workers, the data, making sure that's as robust and accurate as possible, so that we can get that set up, and then finally communication. So communication with the agencies, with the temporary workers, but also the council, making sure that we're communicating with the hiring managers, and again making sure the communication's coming from the leadership within the council as well, saying this is the new direction of change, this is the new direction that we're going down, and these are the new processes that we're in place, to try and embed that as quickly as possible. But that all comes from relationships, but kind of a tried and tested model of what we know works, but also being adaptable and flexible, because every council is different, every implementation is different, and we need to make sure it's tailored to that, but also is looking out for aspects where there's potential change in what's happening during the process.
Absolutely, and it is such a high value contract, isn't it? Councils hold with their agency providers. I know in the West Midlands region, 15% of our local government workforce is provided through agency and temporary provision. We've got, I'd say conservatively, about 125 million spent per year from councils using agency provision. Yet for us, keeping that money in the sector is absolutely vital, and I know that's very aligned with Opus as a wholly owned company, similar to West Midlands Employers. We work together through the WMTemps framework with Opus. Just tell us a little bit about how that WMTemps service offers additional benefits really to councils in the West Midlands region.
Yeah, so as you say, I think the WMTemps framework has been really successful. Sort of 2 years in now, and signed up sort of eight to nine councils already, which is really, really pleasing. In terms of what it's realising is some of the things I've already mentioned in terms of that strategic partnership, adding value where we can, but aligning to the priorities of the council. But I think it's really, really topical at the moment in terms of local government reform, and that regional piece, and the benefits that the councils can all collectively gain by working together on a regional basis. Not competing for agency workforce, actually working together so the region becomes an employer of choice, and people want to come and work in the region, and that can only benefit all the councils within the region. So I think that's a really, really added key benefit that, again, as I say, is really topical at the moment with local government reform, which is about collaborating, which is about working more efficiently, about sort of pooling resources and working together. So from that point of view, I think that's a real benefit. Again, working in a way that ultimately, as sort of West Midlands and Opus align in terms of the core values of public sector heritage. We understand the problem. We're trying to help solve some of the problems, but also realise some of the gains and the opportunities that can bring. So I think understanding the challenges the region is facing helps us help them, and that means we can then come in and add that value, but again still align it to the individual council's priorities, which again collectively will then add much greater benefits regionally.
Yep, and I think alongside that there's also additional benefits, aren't there, around the workforce planning support they secure from Opus, and also the rebate which can help fund further activities.
Yes, so every council that we work with will have its own workforce plan that will align to their strategic priorities. In addition to that, there's the social value aspect that will also align with that plan, so that from a workforce point of view, from a social value point of view and a strategic point of view, that is all aligned, and that can be taken forward through the individual council's priorities, but also aligns with the regional workforce strategy. And as part of that, the more councils that use the service, the greater those added benefits can grow and improve across the region. But again, then that also contributes to a rebate back into the region and back into the councils for workforce planning objectives and strategies as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Opus is an award-winning organisation.
Yes.
You've won many awards over the years, but just tell me a little bit about which award you're most proud of and what that award was for.
So I think most proud of, and a lot of the awards that we go for are in that collaboration space, the partnership space. So we've been highly commended a couple of times, obviously highly commended with yourselves, Northamptonshire's Children's Trust. I think again in the past, Northamptonshire County Council won't mind me saying probably that really struggled in their children's services space, and obviously is now in a Children's Trust. So we've collaborated with the Children's Trust and the leadership within the Children's Trust to help improve the recruitment and the services that they're providing. And again, I think this is where Opus is different. We look at it differently. Is we don't just see recruitment as we're recruiting someone to come and fill a role. Ultimately, it could be someone's start of their career. It could be someone that's been made redundant somewhere and they've now need a new career. It could be getting someone into the public sector that's never worked in the public sector before, or there could be a vulnerable child or a vulnerable adult at the end of that service. So it's really, really important, and it's much bigger than just a piece of recruitment. And I think the example with the Children's Trust, that collaboration, that partnership, has we don't see the end benefits, but we see that actually as a council, its reputation from a children's services point of view has massively increased over that period. And again, we're a small part of that, but that's really rewarding. So very, very proud of that.
Absolutely. And I think it's refreshing to hear that workers, the temporary agency staff, are absolutely at the heart of that, because they're delivering some of the most important services for our councils to the most vulnerable in our community. Often in the past, we've seen agency workers, certainly from the work we've done with them and working on focus groups to understand their experience, tell us that they felt like commodities, that they've just been moved from council to council, they've just been seen as a resource really by an agency. Now, I know with Opus you don't view them in that way, so tell us a little bit about how you support agency workers themselves get into permanent roles, train them, invest in them, and really make sure they are valued.
So we've got high success rate in terms of temp to permanent conversions, sort of averaging about 1 in 4, which is quite a high metric. And actually, we don't charge any fee after 12 weeks for someone going permanent fee. So again, it is that drive to improve recruitment in the organisations that we're working with. And the best way to do that is to get people into those organisations permanently, in the most part. So from that point of view, and I think, again, a lot of the temporary workers that work directly with Opus like the fact that we're publicly owned, because a lot of people, even though they're temporary workers, again, they are stigmatised a little bit, but actually they're in social work or social care because they want to make a difference. They want to improve those services or improve people's lives. So again, from that point of view, even though they're a temporary worker, they quite like the fact that we're publicly owned and they're working directly for us. But even the temporary workers that we're obviously gaining from agencies that we work with on our supply chain, again, they've got a vital role in some of the services that they're playing. And so we take that very, very seriously from a sort of CV vetting point of view or a compliance point of view, because again, as I say, it's very, very important, and someone's life at the end of the day could matter because of who gets placed into that role. So it's very, very important. But in addition to that, what we try and do, again, not just for our direct workers, for our agency workers that we have, we offer skills-based training, which again is quite rare. I don't think there's any other providers that I'm aware of that are offering that. And again, some of those skills, online training that we're offering to the temporary workers is around those softer skills. I think with the changing landscape, AI, etc., the new generations coming through that are much more tech savvy and software savvy, but maybe some skills are lacking in terms of those softer skills, sort of communication and some people that are going into an office, it's the first time they've worked into an office or they've worked with people. It's not been behind a screen. So trying to give back with some of those softer skills, not just for our own employees, but also for temporary workers as well, because it's about that. We've got a campaign at the moment, Future Forward, which is about the sustainable local government workforce for the future. The demographic in local government is quite ages are sort of 50 plus, quite a high proportion. So it's about attracting that next generation and making local government future forward and fit for purpose for the longer term, and that's one aspect of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And giving back to the community is another big theme for Opus, isn't it? That social value. So just tell me a little bit about how you make sure communities benefit from the work that you do.
Yeah, so again, I think just recruitment in general, social value is huge because it is about getting people into work and or people going into work to provide services in the communities. So it's really, really important and very, very linked. So we want to ensure that everyone that wants to work has the opportunity to work, but also understands what's on offer in local government. Because again, I don't think everyone really knows about the careers and the vast variety of career that you could have in local government. So by doing that and coming into local government, you can give back to the community, which is huge from a social value point of view. So us trying to, from an Opus point of view, trying to educate school leavers, educate university leavers about a career in the public sector, what the options are from a social value point of view, also then benefits the longer term plan of obviously improving workforce across local government. So we try and do a lot of things like that. We work with local charities, again, trying to improve people's CV skills or interview skills, things like that they potentially have never had before. So there's lots of things that we try and do, but all geared to trying to get people back into work or into work for the first or change of career. And just so we're giving back into the community and supporting the councils as much as we can.
And I certainly hope that going forward, councils are brave and bold about the decisions they make about agency contracts, because I think through our conversation we've shown the impact it can have, not just on agency workers, on internal workforce, reducing costs, but giving back to the community can be massive, and those contracts should be seen and valued in that way. It's certainly a big theme in the West Midlands local government workforce strategy going forward. So thank you for joining me today, Brad, and shining a light on that.
No,
thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it.